Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the First Nations information session on flood preparedness and response. My name is Casey La Rochelle. I'm zooming in from Sanema territory in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. I'm from the Kitimat Band, and I just help support these information sessions. We're recording it because we offer the recording link to people who can't make the meeting, as well as presentations. And I'd like to welcome everyone. And at the start of these meetings, we just go around and we ask people to introduce themselves. I'll call upon everyone. Their position within your community, any expectations you have of the meeting. And if there's a question that you have about flood preparedness or response, and I'd even say flood mitigation, because we have a wonderful flood mitigation presentation today as well. So I'll go around the screen and ask people to introduce themselves, starting with Trudy Peterson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Trudy Peterson. I'm working with the response team with fness.
Thank you. Robert Larson.
Hi, everyone. I am a project manager and hydrologist with Ebbwater Consulting. We work with a number of you on flood risk reduction. Thanks.
Thank you. Craig Moore.
Hello, everybody. Craig Moore with Ryder Ventures, Wildfire and Flood Protection. We do lots of work with fness and also EMCR for flood control and fires.
Thank you very much. I see a number 097985. If you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Is that us? Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Willie Moon. I'm from the Jowden First Nation. I'm the emergency manager coordinator, and I also have my assistant, and he can introduce himself.
Blake Barzan. I'm just EMC assistant for Jowden.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Willie. Jeff Slingerland. Sorry if I mispronounced that, Jeff.
Yeah, some Dutch guy made it. So yeah, Jeff Slingerland, Kamloops First Nations, the asset coordinator. I work out of planning and engineering.
Thanks. Mr. Ian Cummings, good to see you.
Good to see you, Casey. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope folks are enjoying the snow day here in the Lower Mainland. It's a bit of a novelty, but we're approaching 35 centimeters, so the commute home for folks could be interesting. Anyways, I'm Ian. I'm the Senior Director for Regional Operations at EMCR, and today I'm calling in from Casey First Nation in Pitt Meadows, BC. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you very much. Jolene Rendelik.
Hi. Hi, glad to be here. I'm the community coordinator.
Sorry, Jolene, you're a little garbled. As a backup, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, we can do that as well, unless you want to try it again. You're good?
Yeah. Oh, did I break up? The internet's terrible here.
You're good now.
I'm just said that I'm from Shelath Band. Okay. Shelath Band. I work for the community safety coordinator.
Thank you very much. Michelle Jacobs.
Good morning, Michelle Jacobs with Decision Support for fness. I am a technical trainer. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you, Michelle. Chris Marsh.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's snowy here too, Ian. We've got probably 20 centimeters on the ground already. So I'm emergency management advisor with the Tanaka Nation Council, providing support to the 4 Tanaka communities in the southeast part of the province. No major questions about flood, just looking, to add to my knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Randy Morgan.
Hello, my name is Randy Morgan. I'm from the Gitsan First Nations. I'm the Emergency Service Coordinator of Gitwangak, and I'm going to be the one presenting later.
Thank you very much. Christine King.
Hello, everybody. Siamthala Telsqui Talitzel Costa Alis. My given name is Christine King, and I am the Emergency Programs Coordinator for Alis.
Thank you so much. James Fothergill Brown.
Hi, James Fothergill Brown here. I'm the Emergency Services Coordinator for Dididot First Nation. Thanks for having me and hosting this session.
Thank you, James. Maurice Evans.
Good evening, folks, or afternoon. Morris Evans. I'm the EPC with Okanagan Indian Band, and obviously want to learn more. We had quite a flood at White Man's Creek, well, we'll see what happens this year. But yes, seems that everything's moving up a little faster in the year, so I'm glad that you're having this, Casey.
Thanks for being here. Erica Williams.
I'm Erica Williams, Health Director for Gitwangak, and I'm also a part of our Emergency Operations Committee and our Fire Department. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Albert Nakin.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am working out of Hacklet First Nations, which is located just outside of Lillooet, and I am the Emergency Program Coordinator.
Thank you very much. Allison Lohman. You're on mute.
Oh, I thought I unmuted twice there. Okay, start again. Allison Lowen, I'm with fness. I am with Preparedness and supporting emergency plans and HRVAs currently.
Thank you, Allison. Robert Cosma.
I'm Robert Cosma for the Shackleton National Government. I'm an emergency service coordinator here in support of the 6 Shackleton communities. I'm just here to learn what's going on.
Great to have you here. Colin Marchand.
Hello, everyone. Colin Marchand. I work for the Okanagan Indian Band as a cultural heritage technician and usually fall into IC for emergency response. So I was the IC for the White Man's Creek flood previously. So I'm just looking to expand my knowledge on flood mitigation efforts.
Thank you very much, Colin. Jenny Lynn, fness.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Lynn. I'm the Preparedness Decision Support Analyst with fness, mostly working with longer-term planning and preparedness.
Thanks, Jenny. Clint Williams.
Good afternoon. Clint Williams with the Notsamat Tribal Council. We're largely based on Vancouver Island, mainly Mid-Island South, and a few bands in the Vancouver area. So excited to attend the session to see what I can bring back to our member communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Leah Brody, FNHA.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Brody. I am the operations specialist for our provincial health emergency management team with the First Nations Health Authority. I'm here to witness and to bring back anything, any type of knowledge to support our regions, to support the nations. And thank you for having me.
Good to see FNHA here. David Campbell.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Dave Campbell with the River Forecast Center. We're recently moved into the Ministry of Water, Land, and Resource Stewardship, and I'm calling in today from the Lekwungen territory, just acknowledging the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations.
Thanks. Great to have River Forecast here. Moving along to item number 2 on the agenda is the flood preparedness and response presentation by Randy Lee Morgan, who is an emergency program coordinator with the Gitwangak band. Randy, would you like to share your screen? Perfect. You're on mute, though.
There you go. Good. Hello, my name is Randy Morgan. I'm from the Gitwangak First Nations. I am the newly contracted emergency service coordinator. I'm also a firefighter and first responder for our community. My role is to coordinate training days to recruit and bring in our emergency service departments.
Hey, Randy Lee, you're coming across as really garbled. I wonder, you don't have a microphone. Maybe if you turn off video, it might improve your sound. There's a suggestion on the chat. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Is that better?
Yep, that's better.
Okay. Okay. So my name is Randy Lee Morgan. I'm from Gitwangak and reside in our Gitsa Nation. I am the newly contracted emergency service coordinator. I am also a firefighter and first responder for our community. My role is to coordinate training dates, recruit, and bring our emergency service departments up to minimum standard while creating better emergency plans for our community. So far in my 3 months, I've brought our department 17 active members from 2. I've brought in funding, applied and received grant funding so that we can get the necessary equipment and supplies needed. I've had our fire hall renovated, brought in wildland training programs for the community, in which we had 14 successful applicants receiving 11 certificates. In February, I have the updated first responders course set in place where 12 applicants or 12 members will be certified. I'm currently in the works of bringing in the 1001 levels 1 and 2 firefighter certificate course for our members. Next up on my list is to tackle the emergency plan and update and work on the community safety plans. Fire Smart, flood plan, create the EOC team, etc. So again, thank you. This is not work. Oh, there you go. So Gitwangak is a community who comes together when disaster hits. We are one of 6 communities nestled in the northwestern BC Skeena Valley. We are a semi-remote community located approximately 100 kilometers northeast of Terrace, who live alongside the mighty Skeena River. Gitwangak means people of the rabbits. Our community has a population of about 1,157 members who are registered, with about 443 being on reserve. Our community of Gitwangak has had flooding for several years and are always the first community to experience flooding during freshet season. Each year, we learn new skills on how to respond more effectively. Oops. There. Thinking about freshet season starts way before the season even arrives. As we come out of winter, we are monitoring snowpack levels, rate of snowmelt, daily temperatures, overnight temperatures, and rain and snow events. As April and May draw closer, some of our visual cues for flooding impacts start with high water at the first bridge. I'd like to do an overview of our past flood impacts. So in 2022, the water rose considerably at our first and second bridge. The water almost breached our pump house, which is one of our critical infrastructures. Sandbagging was needed. Water also rose high and took out half the road and had to be restructured and raised. Alongside the creek, alongside our second bridge, there has been multiple log jams that has been growing. This has been a great concern for our community and currently hopefully in the works for mitigation. 2023, our Gitsan West is our new school that has been in the works of being built. A floodplain has been known for that very area in which they chose. April, May, water started to rise in the back by the two creeks, reaching the sides of the roads and working its way into the fields. This is our first indication, our first trigger point. When it reaches the yard of the nearby house, that's known as our second trigger point. Where the school is being built, there was natural dikes that were created. When the river rose in the back, it would flow through that dike and get redirected back to the creek. During the progression of the school, they had removed that natural dike and laid the foundation of the school. When the water rose, half the school's foundation was in water, with water covering and running into the houses directly next to the school, covering the basement floor and yard, in which was waist high deep, with water flowing across the road into the house directly across from it, covering the yard and breaching the trailer next to it, as you can see. Next up is flood response, prepare and evacuation planning. Know your system, know your community, make sure you have all your resources for all your equipment required. Sandbags, sandbag machines, tiger dams, EOC team put in place. Contact your emergency management and receive your task number from EMBC. Have plans established for worst case scenarios. Have one lead person in charge who communicates with EMBC. Having too many people making calls confuses everyone and everything. Keep your contact list up to date. Ensure everyone knows their role within your EOC team. Create your evacuation plan. Our primary route was created. So you travel south on Highway 16 to New Hazelton or to Smithers. The secondary route was Cranberry Forest Service Road, which allows access to Terrace from Highway 37 north of community. Another route was going through CN Rail, another option to make arrangements to help transport community members out. Okay, action to your response. Ensure your water system safety, critical infrastructures, pump house. Ensure that your road structures safety and are accessible. Ensure community member safety. Sandbag houses that are in need. Flood monitoring. So we have two of our closest reporting stations are the first one being Gitwangak River, which is this dot, near Gitwangak. And then our second point is Skeena River at Glenville, which is that point. So we monitor the water levels, especially in those areas of high risk, identify triggers, and notify community members via social media. For Gitwangak, that has become one of our biggest ways of getting info out. Oops, sorry. Okay, so again, we had a 2-year comparison in 2022. Freshet season started in June. Skeena rose from 5.1 meters. Resources requests were put in for a flood assessor, 27,000 sandbag machines, and about 3,000 meters of tiger dams. Between June 4th and 6th, the tiger dams and sandbags were put in place. Water levels were 5.4, but the highest of that year was 7 meters at the Skeena. In 2023, our freshet season started in May with the River Forecast Center Skeena being at 6.7 meters. We brought in 1,900 feet of tiger dam, 2 sandbag machines, 8 dump loads of sand, I believe, was provided, and BC wildland firefighters were provided to help in support. Oops. The next one is community coming together. So disasters often bring communities together, helping each other out and helping those in need. As you can see, we had a lot of community members who came out to help support, help with sandbag, just all together help with this event that was happening. Oops, sorry. My thank you. So next is to execute the response. You know your community best. So in 2023, sandbags were put in place for both yards and house. A berm was also created by our local amazing team who knew our community best and knew exactly what to do. That berm that went from where the new stream flowed by the school to right behind a house property in which the stream flowed that was near the road. It was successful. Waters rescinded from both houses being affected, as well as the school. So this was the new berm. This was the team. It was pretty awesome. Oops. Okay, next is to wrap up and review, plan for the next time and update the emergency plan. Erosion, and so you do the erosion and flood review application, plan ahead and order sandbags, create a flood preparedness plan, which is in the works, do your after action review, create a mitigation work and put that, start the process for that, create an evacuation plan, update your emergency plan while working on mutual agreements with neighboring communities. Successes and lessons learned. We have learned that every year is a different story taught by Mother Nature, that our community needs to be prepared, and that anything can happen. Look for signs, build an emergency plan before the freshet seasons, have your EOC team chosen and prepared, while continue building relationships and stay connected or stay in contact with your local agencies. That's it.
Thank you very much, Randy. I'd like to open it up for any questions and answers if there are any. You can either raise your hand and I'll keep an eye, and if you're on the phone, feel free to just jump in as well. I know it's a bit of information. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'm just having a quick look in the chat. There's a whole bunch of links there that I think we can get Ian to go over when he does his topic. Clint Williams, I see your hand.
Hi there. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and information. I don't know if it's a silly question or not, but I was just wondering what the costs. You mentioned that you used quite a bit of Tiger Dam. Did your community purchase that on your own, or did you get that from a source? Just kind of curious, and also curious what one section of Tiger Dam costs approximately.
So if Erica Williams, if you're on this call with me, she was one of the EOC members that I'm hoping that maybe you're able to help share some information.
Yeah, for sure, Randy. Thank you. So once we established the need to activate our EOC, we got the task number from EMCR, and then that activated a whole other pathway of communications with us, the Gitwangak EOC, fness, and EMCR. Once that was activated, I believe it was fness that brought the Tiger Dams out, and it was deployed by BC Wildfire. So there were costs in also having sandbaggers come out from community, and we were supported through fness for that. So our task number, we had any expenses come through our office, and then we went through the process of applying for reimbursement for those costs.
Thank you very much, Erica. Looking in the chat, I see a couple people said excellent and great presentations and thanking you. And then there's a link for the UBCM CPF program. And there's 2 fness staff who could help you with funding applications,
We
especially
can't hear you,
for...
Casey.
Oh, I'm not on mute.
No, still can't hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. James Fothergill Brown, yeah, I see your hand raised.
Still don't have volume.
Yeah, I'm just curious about mitigation work. Thanks so
Oh,
much for the
I can't.
presentation, Randy,
It's me.
Erica. Yeah, I'm wondering what sort of mitigation work have you folks done? And do you know off the top of your head what sort of mitigation work is eligible to be done for flood mitigation?
Erica asks again if you are able to answer this question.
Yeah, for sure, Randy, thanks. For mitigation, we've started meeting with the ISC, which is Indigenous Services Canada. And what happened was we had contracted a firm to come and assess our the 2 rivers that connect at Gitwangak. So there's the Sadak River, which is also known as the Kitwanga River, which is where the main source of flooding and threat to our community water supply occurred at our pump house. So they had drone flyovers, which was included under the task number. And they also had, I'm sorry, I can't recall the name of the firm that came and did the other assessment, in addition to EMCR's flood assessors. But they did do a more in-depth review of the causes of flooding and the redirection of the river. But a lot of the source of flooding did come from a lot of log jams. So there's a number of log jams that we actually did a flyover in the late spring when the forest fires were starting outside our community. And we were able to see the locations of some of the log jams that are causing river rediversion. That's one of the priority areas to get the Kitwanga River cleared and back on its natural path. And then the riverbank on the Skeena River, which has over a number of years, and the flooding that continues to happen year by year, caused a lot of erosion. And it's actually along the portion of the community where our totem poles are. And there's a few structures, office buildings, and a corner just upriver, or sorry, it's upriver, where there's part of the road starting to erode into the river. So that's going to be one of the bigger expenses in mitigating further damage to community infrastructure. We are having occasional periodic planning meetings, and what we'll do is put in an application to ISC for the costs around putting in riprap on that portion of Skeena.
Thank you, Erica. Are there any additional questions on the presentation? And if not, we can move on to the next topic. Not seeing any hands. I just want to echo the comments. Randy, great presentation. I really appreciate the work that you and Erica have put in, and working with you, and I definitely learned something as well. My hat's off to you. I think your community's doing great work.
Thank you. And thank you, Erica.
So we have a slight change in the order of topics. And so I'd like to introduce Ian to talk about funding and supports provided either before or during a flood event, or even briefly on recovery. And I'm not sure if ISC is on the line. It's okay if they're not, but we also like to have ISC give information as well. Go ahead, Ian.
Sure. Thanks, and excellent presentation. I'll actually make mine quite easy because I can use the example. So a lot of the supports for EMCR that I'm going to talk about aren't just unique to flooding. So, the process in terms of EOC activation and contacting EMCR, that's a key one, no matter what you're facing, so we can help the communities get the resources and the agencies that they're looking for. So rather than trying to worry about, what's the 1-800 number for fness, or man, I'd really like to talk to the River Forecast Center about, or no, the weather appears to be changing and we can't get a hold of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Use the 1-800-663-3456 number at EMCR. It's a 24/7, 365 access into emergency management support, and we can get you connected to the right people. Now, if you have fness's number and that's posted up on your wall, or you have it memorized, the fness team can get you access in as well. But we are, promoting the 1-800 number as a bit of a one-stop shop there. So when it comes to flood mitigation work, there's a couple of avenues there, and Casey already spoke to help that's available from fness under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund that is being managed by UBCM, or the Union of BC Municipalities. And that's probably the best starting point. If you have an area that is constantly being impacted by flooding, then it's likely a candidate for mitigation, and the CEPF funding can help with that. Where EMCR under regional operations can help in the mitigation realm is, say, as an example, after the winter season, and you have community members out either looking at areas in the community that might be prone to flooding, and you notice something like, oh, that doesn't look right, and something that's causing you some concern, give us a call, and then we'll work with the flood mitigation experts in the province or fness to come out and have a look. And if that recommendation comes back that says, hey, yeah, there is a problem here at this particular location, and if we don't do something right away, we could see significant impacts. And then under the new emergency management regulation, we might be able to provide some funding to help with temporary mitigation of that particular site to prevent a problem downstream. So in terms of, pardon the pun with the downstream comment, there it just comes to me naturally when talking about flooding. The other avenues on the mitigation side, CEPF funding, when you do chat with us at the regional office, we can also point you into some federal funding that's there. And if the ISC folks were on, they would talk to you about EMAP dollars that might be able to be applied there. And I know fness is also an excellent resource for what other federal funding dollars might be available to communities. Under response, when we issue the task number to you, the operation of your EOC, incremental costs related to that response. And what we mean by incremental costs is if you have somebody working or within the nation that is doing their normal day job, Monday to Friday, that would be a normal expense. But if you need them to work additional or extra hours or perhaps on an evening or a weekend, that would be an incremental cost that EMCR would able to support under our current legislation. And then as you heard from the previous presenter, whether fness comes in with tiger dams that they have located around the province. Provincially, we also have a number of tiger dams or gabion baskets or more traditional sandbags that we can make available at no cost to you and provide crews and equipment to help get them set up. So there's a number of different areas where EMCR could provide some assistance to you there. But Casey, might be best just to open it up for any questions that folks may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. If people have questions, maybe raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, I'd say just jump right in. And I put in the chat that the fness emergency management funding list has a mitigation section, and the flood resources also has the mitigation materials as well. We structured it that way.
Thanks, Casey. That's an excellent document.
And it's okay if there's no questions. We will open it up for questions at the end if it comes to you that you should have asked something.
And I'll put my email in the chat. Folks, feel free to contact me at any time. Thanks again, my friend, for the opportunity, Casey. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ian, for the update as always. Moving along, I'd like to introduce David Campbell from the BC River Forecast Center. And David, I don't know if you want to screen share anything.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just kind of just go through the little brief outlook on some of the flood season aspects, some of the tools, and some of the outlook that we've got right now in terms of conditions as they're emerging. So starting with just general flood related things, we look at two broad flood seasons that we're kind of geared up towards in the province, the fall winter side of things, where we get heavy rainfall, typically through the October-January period. This is predominantly in the coastal areas, and really the key driver of flooding in this case is the heavy rainfall. But we can also see that rain on snow component as well that comes in. And there's certainly been a lot more discussion about atmospheric rivers over the past few years. And this is really the process by which we get most of our heavy rainfall events. Certainly seen the use of the term atmospheric river more. And I kind of want to try to alleviate some of the concerns that may come up in the term. They're very frequent events. We get about a dozen or two of them a year. For the most part, it's the typical rainy day that we see through that fall winter period. So most of them tend not to be extreme, but they can be the source of extreme rainfall when we do see it. Broadly speaking, we're seeing that the intensity of these and the frequency of them are increasing with climate change. That's something that came out of the flooding that occurred on the southwest coast in 2021. When we deal with atmospheric rivers, one of the difficulties is in the forecasting side, where we can understand that an event is coming, but really getting the detailed idea of what the impacts might be can be quite difficult. So often they provide a good heads up for us that events are coming, but we can't necessarily forecast the conditions down to a high degree of granularity. And then there's the traditional season that we think about in terms of the freshet and the spring snowmelt across the province. And in these cases, the snowpack that we have as we build up over the winter is really the key driver of understanding what the hazards might be as we come into the snowmelt period, which is from about the middle or latter part of April through to about June. This is predominantly in the interior, but we do get those watersheds that span into the coast, like the Skeena that we were talking about earlier, or was discussed earlier, and other watersheds along the coast that have that high snowpack and mountain side of things. So we've got the snow, and then really the drivers are how quickly does that snow melt. So hot weather as we go through the spring period, that can be really a transition from the rapid transition into spring. And then rainfall still is important, even in times where we don't have that heavy snowpack, or when we do and we get additional runoff from rainfall as we go through the period as well. Areas, particularly in the northeast and along the kind of boundary of the Rocky Mountains, they can really see that heavy rainfall, upper lows that persist into July and can cause flooding on their own. So in terms of what we're seeing so far this year, we just released the first snow bulletin of the year, and really jumping out at us is the very low snowpack in pretty much all regions, 56% of normal averaged across all of the province, and really the Stikine regions, though in the far northwest, the only area where we're seeing closer to normal. So we're seeing this probably about the lowest snowpack since about 1980 at a broad level. And obviously there's a bit of regional variation that comes into that. And we are seeing in a number of areas very, very low snowpack, particularly on the coast, Vancouver Island. In terms of the flood outlook, at this point, we're about halfway through the accumulation season, so things could change, but we are seeing that at the early stages of probably a lighter flood hazard as we come into the spring. But the flip side is the potential for that to cause issues on the drought side and low water supply. In terms of seasonal things, one of the things we're really tracking this year is a very strong El Nino. What this is just warm temperatures off the Pacific Ocean on the equator, and this really drives weather into the seasonal side of things into BC. There's discussion this is probably one of the top 5 El Ninos that we've seen. It's a very strong signature there, and the reason we take note of this is really it tends to be a real driver for the weather that we see, and something that we can kind of hold a seasonal forecast to a little bit more. With the strong El Nino, we tend to get the stronger impacts, and for our region, that really is a warm winter and a warm into the spring side of things. What that tends to lead to is the below normal snowpack, which is what we've been seeing. We've seen the warm weather. We tend to see a lot of rain, or precipitation comes rain, and that leads to higher winter stream flow. The snow is not building up; it's kind of working through its system as rain. We don't see a strong signature on rainfall intensity or storms or precipitation. So we really kind of look at the warm signature as being the key side of things. And that's just really what's shaping up in terms of the seasonal forecast coming out of Environment Canada. Just on this panel, we've got the temperature forecast for the kind of late winter part, January, February, March, and really a strong signature of warm pattern. In the middle is precipitation, not a lot of strong signature, which again, it's difficult to forecast on the long range for precipitation. It's really not showing a signature, which is consistent with El Nino as well. On the far right is the snow forecast, and it's similarly picking up that El Nino signature and expecting to continue to see this low snowpack. As we go into the spring, same forecast. The signature drops off a little bit, but continuing to see that warm, low snowpack. So really a strong trend towards that this year, and I think that will continue to be the story that we're watching. In terms of information sources, so really looking at the side of the River Forecast Center and putting information out that people can access to support with flood planning and response. One of the key things really is looking at the snowpack. So we put out a monthly bulletin, at this point, the snow bulletin. And really that is just an analysis of the snow measurements that are taken around the province. Those are taken once a month. About half the sites or so are manual sites that are technicians go out and do a measurement on the ground. And there's about half of the sites that are automated in real time. So we get an hourly update of what's going on there. So we publish these about the 7th day of the month through January through April. As we come into May, we do it twice a month to capture that snow melt side of things and really assess the ongoing risk as we go through the spring. All of the information really is available on the River Forecast Center website, so gov.bc.ca/river forecast. But also we put this out as an email. It's available on the website. It goes out to EMCR and is hopefully distributed. And it can be kind of, depending on how deep people like to get into the details, it has the very high level, here's what's going on, but also the individual measurements. For those that are looking for more detailed snow information, really acknowledging that we rely on the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change's snow program that really facilitates and coordinates the management of the snow monitoring in the province. But certainly if you want to drill into detailed information of the snow measurements that are being taken, and again, that real-time day-to-day or hour-by-hour information is available there, as well as information from the weather sites that can include temperature, the snow water equivalent, the snow depth, so other pertinent information. In terms of the flood side of things, obviously the flood warnings are a key piece of distributing information and concerns about impending flood conditions. So we do issue advisories, watches and warnings. These go up on the website, but also get, again, distributed through to EMCR and distributed amongst the email distribution list. And information is also picked up by the social media team at EMCR and rebroadcast through Twitter, or X as it's called now, as well as the Emergency Info BC source. So lots of good information on those sites as well to support. In terms of the warnings, we've got 3 levels. As I say, the high stream flow advisory is like the lowest level. This is where we're expecting rivers to be rising, and we could see sort of low level areas impacted adjacent to rivers. We also use this one as a little bit of the heads up. We're seeing some conditions that are coming, but we may have some uncertainty of how intense the storm might be or how much the rivers might be coming up. And we'll use a high stream and flow advisory to help just raise awareness of potential conditions that could be adverse that are coming at us. Once we have a more solid understanding that these events or conditions are going to materialize, we will bump it up to a flood watch, and that's really where we're expecting we could see some overbank flooding in areas adjacent to the river. It might be on the borderline as well. We tend to use, or we tend not to have detailed information at a site that a local community might have about, this is the trigger point for our community where we start to see flooding. That's information that we don't necessarily have at the River Forecast Center. So we try to interpret that the best we can based on historic river information. And then when we get into the flood warning, that's where we're releasing the strong signature and expecting to see quite adverse conditions and flooding adjacent to rivers. And again, if we know those triggers, we'll use those to help guide that. But there really is anticipating a fairly heavy layer of flooding. We don't have a 4th category, but that would certainly something we've been thinking about is, those times where we're anticipating the potential for really catastrophic flooding. But at this point, it would be captured by the flood warning. So again, the information's on the website. We've got a mapping, just a few pieces of caution that the mapping is pretty broad based. We've got these large watersheds that really provide some regional context, but we're not able to really zoom into that really local level. As I mentioned, the high stream flow advisory can be that kind of initial warning and maybe a sort of alert to something that might develop into something that's a little bit more significant. A newer product we've been developed or starting to release over the last year has been the 7-day outlook. And this is something that we produce twice a week and is really just, again, another heads up product to help communicate where we're seeing periods of increased flood hazard, where weather conditions and patterns might be indicating of something that's coming that we might need to pay attention to over the next half week to a week. So at the moment, we're doing this as an opt-in for this information. I think we will be looking to put this on a regular basis up onto the website. But if people would like to get this information, again, reaching out through our rfc@gov.bc.ca email, and I'll put this information at the end as well. Real-time information on rivers is certainly something we rely on. Is information that's available on the website. I won't go too much into the detail, but this is really that real-time information that the Water Survey of Canada produces, and we do some additional analysis to help interpret that information. And then onto the forecasting side of things. So we do run a couple of hydrologic models. We've got the coffee model, which we tend to use for that fall-winter flood season with the heavy rainfall events. And then the Clever model, which is more of our modeling that we use across the province for spring freshet, but we also do use it in the fall flooding as well. And this really will give us a 5 to 10 day outlook of bringing in the weather forecast and bringing that into the modeling of the stream processes and trying to predict out what to expect. Now, there's a number of caveats that go into the forecasting and the modeling. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty that comes into it. That can be in the model itself. It could be in the weather forecast. It could be in just the complexity of trying to capture very complex terrain and mountainous terrain in the province with very little monitoring that goes into actual observations. So it's a difficult process to get right, and so we certainly caution that this is an opinion that comes out of putting numbers into a model and getting a result of what that interprets that information to be. So we definitely do need to use these with some caution. We've got an interpretive guide. I won't go too much detail to this, but certainly if people are looking for that more information, if they're looking at using the forecasts as a more used tool for their communities, certainly looking into some of those interpretive guides is helpful. We try to capture the uncertainty of the model, so we are regularly assessing how well the models do at predicting flow, and we try to bring that information back in to help represent that in terms of uncertainty into the future. And we're also continually looking at revising the models, whether we're adding new locations into the forecast. And one of the big upgrades we're working on this year is bringing in higher resolution data, to bring in hourly observation and forecast data. We've been using a daily time step up until now, so we're hoping that will, particularly in smaller watersheds, help resolve some of the accuracy side of things. So yeah, summary, just looking at, we're kind of in that transition period coming out of the fall winter season at this point. We're still in it, but nothing really in the short-term horizon. The key feature at this point really is that low snowpack, and so we're continuing to monitor that. And with a few months left, we could certainly see that situation change. And really putting out the plug that the River Forecast Center is here to support, and certainly appreciate feedback in terms of the products and services we're putting out, and really are trying to tailor as best we can the services that we are providing to help to be useful for communities. So with that, I'll wrap up, and thanks for the chance to chat today, and pass it back to you, Casey. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dave. If you can maybe stop sharing the screen, and my screen will reappear. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, maybe raise your hand, and if you're on the phone, just jump in. Trudy. You're on mute, Trudy.
Hi, Dave. I had a question about, as communities build up their own kind of information infrastructure, and they bring in weather stations and those kinds of things, how helpful are those to be integrated with any forecasting that the River Forecast Center does?
Yeah, it can be really helpful, and I think those times where we do see that, for the most part, we're always information limited on observations. So I think any addition is helpful. There's a few avenues that we can look to try to how to actually bring that information in. So access to the information and having it in a format that we can kind of grab onto. There's a provincial program, the Climate Related Monitoring Network program. I always forget the acronym, but they look at provincial networks of observations and help kind of bring those together, and that could be an effective way of helping to collate all that information so that it's accessible. And yeah, and so we certainly have examples of places where either we're tapping into some of that information that's been cycled through into that network, or more standalone river gauges and things like that that can help provide that on the ground, or more local information that's supportive. So we've been trying to do that as best as we can, and certainly reaching out if there is that information available, we can look at how to grab it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any further questions? Robert, did you have a hand up?
Yep. Yeah, Dave, yeah, just some quick feedback on that newer product, the 7-day outlook. I do really appreciate it. I think it comes in my inbox a couple times a week. I can't say I look at it every time, but it's nice to know that it's there when you know there's the weather's doing some interesting things. And I especially appreciate you guys. It seems like you spend some time thinking about some specific graphics that would be interesting to kind of tell the story of what's going on. So that's great.
Great. Thanks for that feedback.
I also had another kind of climate weather question. Not sure if you can answer it, but I'm just trying to think of, you're talking about how we have a pretty strong El Nino cycle right now. I'm trying to reconcile how this current Arctic outflow, you know, fits into that picture. Is this something that's happening because the jet stream is weakening and is more wobbly, and so there's more Arctic air coming down, or is this like a fluke event, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's potentially a combination of the two of those. You know, we know, even though that we expect to see that warm signature, we know that we can get that fluctuation in weather patterns. So certainly the opportunity to have, you know, a range of weather patterns amongst a signature. It's going to be interesting to see, because it's been such a strong negative signature that, you know, certainly it will probably mask out any warming this month, would be my guess, by the time we get to the end of the month. And whether this is, it's, you know, it's looking like it's been a pretty significant event on a historic side. It's not the coldest ever, but certainly it's the coldest we've seen, broadly speaking, for quite a long time. So whether there's something in there that's related to jet stream impacts, I'm not entirely sure that we've got that correlation, but I think there's certainly the possibility of it. But yeah, I think it does highlight that we can, even in these years where we expect to see something like warmer, we recognize that we can see these periods that do come up as being quite cold, or we still have that potential for extremes that are unexpected.
Thank you, Dave. If there's no other questions, I have a question that might be in the next presentation, unless Dave, you have a really quick comment on it. When you there's been mention of downstream effects and whatnot in previous presentations. And I know with the DRRCA and floodplain mapping and BC flood response plan and a whole lot of areas like drought response, the emphasis on regional collaboration. And I'm assuming that that's pretty key for floodplain mapping and response and stuff. And if you can comment briefly on that. And Robert, I'm not sure if you're covering that a little bit as well in your presentation. So
yeah, it's Robert doing that. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a good answer on that. I think the intent is that you know, when the floodplain mapping and things are taken, obviously that local consideration, regional consideration is expected to be form part of that the building of both the modeling and assessment that goes into the floodplains, as well as the hydrology, things like that. But I think probably you're diving also into more of the sort of specific community needs related to that, which I'm not necessarily don't necessarily have the best answer to. So maybe I'll lob it a little bit towards Robert's side if he's able to capture it in his presentation.
Perfect. All right, Robert, I'd like to introduce Robert from Ebbwater, and he's going to present, his topic is, what is flood mitigation and how do we achieve it? And thank you very much, David, for your presentation.
Thanks, Casey. So Casey suggested someone do a talk on this topic for this venue, and I agreed. So here I will jump into it. Unfortunately, flood mitigation is not something that we can just kind of put our finger on and talk about very simply. And that's because managing floods can be quite messy, and I think probably most of you understand that. And that's floods are disruptive. They can be unpredictable and occur suddenly. They obviously create high emotions in the moment and even after an event. They affect communities across BC and wider, and they affect some disproportionately, especially Indigenous communities, as we've seen, and more remote communities. Floods are complex they interact with other natural hazards. And probably the most important part is that they don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. So all these things combine to make flood management and mitigation what we call a wicked problem. So in BC, as with many governments around the world, we grapple with this issue. And in BC currently, flood mitigation sort of falls into two components of flood infrastructure maintenance and emergency responses. And so we've tried to sort of compartmentalize these things and place them in a box. But of course, that box, we can never shut it. And that's because flood management really is a process. So to better understand how we can move forward, I think it's worth kind of exploring this process. And I'm just going to take you on a quick journey of the evolution of flood management. So to do that, just going to borrow some thoughts that have been put together by Sayers et al., British academic who's sort of a leader in this field. So he's broken down sort of the evolution of flood management into 6 stages. So I'm just going to go through the first 3 here. So if we think of the first stage, this would have been, talking very broadly here, but in the BC context, we can think about pre-colonial settlement times when populations lived sort of much closer to the land and probably understood the nature's rhythms more sort of intuitively, and understood that that people needed to move away from floodplains during things like freshet seasons and high rainfall events. And then sort of moving forward from that, thinking after colonial times when people started to settle on the land to do agriculture and make use of fertile land. Obviously, people started to settle and build more permanent structures in floodplains. And again, there are some important nuances here, recognizing that a lot of reserves were established and communities were forced onto these lands. So a lot of these decisions were not made by those who actually live there. And then moving down, this led to sort of a natural progression to wanting to protect that infrastructure that was installed on floodplains, and so building things like dams and dikes and larger infrastructure. So this is where we've sort of gotten to in BC, and it's led to this issue that we call the safe development paradox, where we have measures that lead to infrastructure lock-ins with potential unintended consequences, and things like and it's creating this perceived increased safety that can induce increased development, which leads to kind of this safety dilemma. So I think this kind of parallels that when we think about that open box I talked about before, and sort of the approaches in BC that are focused both on the infrastructure maintenance and the emergency response. And that's because we've got a lot of people and things that are in floodplains that are protected, but that can cause catastrophic consequences when those defenses fail, such as what happened a couple of years ago, for example, in Sumas Lake area. But there is a way forward. We're starting to see things change. I'll give one example. Again, just broad brush here, but in the emergency management compartment, we traditionally used to kind of like be caught in this cycle of having a flood event and then responding to that event and thinking about building back the way things were. So we'll call that status quo recovery. But there's this increasing recognition that there's a better way if we build back better together in recovery and really think about creating safer, more resilient communities that includes ecosystems. And so the key to this process is shown in the bottom right of this graphic here, and that has to do with understanding and reducing risk. So we'll just keep that in mind as I continue through our journey of the evolution of flood management. So the kind of the fourth stage is recognizing that there's a desire to reduce flood damages. So again, we're kind of going through this in BC, and then these next parts, I'd say, we're acknowledging and trying to implement, such as a desire to manage risks effectively. So this is where we realize that budgets are limited, and government payouts are not infinite, and that we have to really take stock of what is being damaged and how can we make better decisions to move things out of the floodplain. And then this last kind of stage is this desire to promote opportunities and manage risks adaptively. And that's where we can acknowledge things like climate change and population growth and the funding question as well. So I'm going to dive into the risk sort of based perspective now, given sort of this broader context that I think we should be looking at flood mitigation. So diving into flood risk reduction, what we like to do is use this graphic very simply to explain what risk is sort of in a flood management context. So we can think of it as being composed of three components that are shown here. So on the left-hand side, you've got the hazard. So in this case, we're talking about flood. And specifically, we're talking about the negative consequences of flood, because we need to acknowledge that, flood is a natural hazard with potentially beneficial, well, we know there are beneficial consequences to ecosystems such as cottonwood ecosystems. It's got regenerative capabilities also for fish populations. But for this purpose, we're thinking about sort of the negative consequences. And on the right-hand side, we've got the exposure component, and this is thinking about all the things that are in the way of the floodwater that could be affected. So this is, the people, the places, the sacred areas, potentially some ecosystems. And then in the bottom of the triangle is the vulnerability. And this is thinking about the things that are susceptible to the floodwaters. So again, when we're thinking about people, it could be groups of people, it could be elderly and youth, for example, or more isolated populations. It could be buildings and infrastructure that are older versus newer. And even in terms of ecosystems, we can think again of those floodplain ecosystems that are much more less susceptible to flood because they're meant to be there. Two key things to kind of remember about this diagram is that we can reduce the risk if we reduce any side of this triangle. And then the second thing is that these components, especially hazard and exposure, are dynamic. So they can actually go up or down, increase or decrease, especially when we think about hazard. So we think about dynamic hazard, and things like climate change are making that worse in general. Other factors that can contribute to this dynamic hazard and exposure are things like land use and cover change, as well as development and increasing populations in those flood zones. Again, related to that safety dilemma that I touched on earlier. So I think within sort of this broader perspective of risk reduction, we can then talk about mitigation options. So I'm just going to walk through some really high level options that we can consider. So in terms of risk reduction options, we can think of land stewardship, and this is all about maintaining and restoring natural assets and systems. And then I think a precursor to this step, obviously, is doing all that technical modeling and mapping to understand, where is the floodwater, where is it going, what's affecting those hazards. I had a few more slides going more into sort of like cumulative pressures and interacting factors in a watershed, such as wildfires. So we can maybe go back to that if we have time in the questions, but there's a lot that can be done in land stewardship. And then moving along in terms of land use management, we can think of strategies to make the best use of our floodplains once we understand where they are and how bad the floodwaters can get. We can use those tools to establish setbacks and even think about retreating some assets over time and doing that, within a long-term planning exercise. And then following that, we've got building management. So for some infrastructure that, for whatever reason, doesn't make sense to move out of the floodplain, we can think about flood proofing. And if we're even building new structures, we can use flood resistant materials for ground floors, or just use those buildings more effectively and understand that we shouldn't put valuables, say, in ground floors, or build basements where there's groundwater flooding and that sort of thing. And then in terms of small structural, so recognizing that we don't want to lock ourselves into that infrastructure issue, there definitely is a space to think about small structural solutions that can include things like detention ponds and building natural constructed wetlands, for example, that can increase the absorption of water during flood events. And then there's obviously upgrade, just getting a phone call here. Upgrade drainage systems that would include increasing the capacity of culverts, as well as potentially increasing the span of bridges, raising roads, and even potentially, constructing small berms to protect critical infrastructure, such as water treatment system that maybe wasn't sited properly with the knowledge of floodplains. So those are 4 examples related to risk reduction. And then moving on to resilience building options. So these are really designed to help communities just be smarter. So if we think of emergency preparedness and response, this is about creating the human resource capacity, which is what most people in the room here today are doing. And then leveraging, so having folks like yourselves leverage tools that people like Dave were just talking about, the climate and hydrometric tools, to be able to develop forecast systems and trigger points to help emergency managers communicate and act in times of oncoming floods, and doing things like setting up temporary barriers. And I'll get into an example here in a couple slides. Next, we can use insurance and disaster financial assistance. And these are designed really to recognize that we can never reduce risk to zero. There's always going to be some residual risk, and so some funds there are needed to support recovery. And then finally, we can invest in education and awareness. And again, that's I think the purpose of today's call. And there's lots of resources out there, and we can definitely learn from each other. And I think a part of this too, touching on what we were just talking about before this, was taking that regional perspective, right? And thinking about the wicked problem, and how communities can't necessarily tackle flood on their own, recognizing that floodwaters don't follow our traditional boundaries and jurisdictions. So we really need to work together with all levels of governments to tackle flood management and mitigation. So I've got 2 examples here. This is really more of a resource I want to share. This is a project that was completed for a regional district in the Okanagan. It talks about really the 6 or 7 of the options I just was talking about, and really drills down and provides 40 actions, 40 clear actions that can be done within those categories. So it's the non-structural flood mitigation resource guide. And it's, it was developed for the Okanagan, but it really applies everywhere in BC. And it's got some really succinct information talking about the actions, and presenting things like key opportunities and challenges, what works well for the option at a regional level, and what's required to make the option work, and what combines well with it, for example. So that's available at the link below. I encourage you to check it out. And then the second example is a project that we completed with support from fness to work with First Nations along the Fraser River. This was in preparation of a large Fraser River freshet flood from a couple of years ago. Everyone was looking at the snowpack, and the forecasts were showing that there could be a potentially really high event. So we did some proactive planning work on that one. So we went to these communities, visited the communities to learn about what were the critical assets that could be in the floodwaters. We also did flood mapping to kind of understand where the water would be depending on different river levels. And then we combined all that information together. So on the one hand, we delineated the critical assets to get a sense of the length of temporary flood barriers that would be required to protect them at different water levels. And then we created, that's what's shown on the right there in that map. And then on the left, we created this forecasting tool that emergency managers like yourselves could use, and that was linked to the forecasted flows on the Fraser River to help them rather communicate to their communities what actions they should be taken. And so you can think of those colors I have there more or less matching, though there's slightly different colors, there's 3 of them, or I guess there's 4. Anyway, more or less kind of matching the kind of different stages that Dave was talking about earlier. We're always, it seems like, one step behind the RFC. Yeah, so that's the general idea with that exercise, and that can be done for most communities. But I guess the trick there is doing the flood mapping and modeling to inform this. So that's all I had, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. If you can maybe stop sharing screen, perfect. I see Willie Moon, you have your hand raised.
Hi, I was just writing down the flood mitigation. I was wondering if you could go back to the slide and finish.
That the resource there?
Yeah, the mitigation options.
Sorry, which one? This, or go up or down?
I'm not seeing it, sorry.
The reshare.
Oh, shoot, I've got to share, correct, sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's the one, thank you.
Happy for Casey to share the presentation.
Yeah, it's up now.
No, but I mean, happy if you want to share it by email as well after to the group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would appreciate a copy. Thanks for that, Robert.
We'll share the recording link, and we'll share the presentations that were provided.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Willie, does that answer your question? Sorry, I was clicking on a few things.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Robert? That's okay if there's not. Well, I think we can reclaim another 40 or so minutes of our day. My thank you to all those that presented. Randy, I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing in your community there, and all the other presenters for the great information and presentation, and those of you who took the time here to participate. We'll be putting out soon on February 15th. We're going to do an early information session on wildfire preparedness and response, which will include post-wildfire hazards and ways to kind of deal with them. So a little bit early in the wildfire season, but it might be prudent before, you know. So if there's no other questions, thank you everyone, and enjoy the remainder of your day. I hope everyone's doing well in this cold spell.